Hi, today I'm showing you how to make a beef stroganoff pot pie. And you heard that correctly, it's everything you love about beef stroganoff but in a pot pie form. I'm starting out by cleaning my mushrooms. I like to remove the stems for this before slicing them into 1/4 inch pieces. To clean them, just take a damp paper towel and run across the top to remove any soil. A few tips when you're at the grocery store looking for quality mushrooms is to check for visible wet brown spots on the mushrooms. This usually means that the mushrooms are on their way out. You should also smell them. They should smell woodsy and earthy, but you can tell that they may be about to spoil when they have a sharp ammonia-like scent. I roughly chop a medium onion and set that off to the side. In a large pot on medium heat, I'm browning 1 pound of 80/20 beef. I like the 80/20 beef as it provides a good amount of fat and flavor, but you can use a leaner blend if you prefer. Once the beef is fully cooked, I remove it from the pan using a strainer. I want to leave the beef fat behind in the pan as I'm going to use this to cook the vegetables. I add to the pan 3 tablespoons of butter and then begin cooking my mushrooms. If you're using a leaner blend of beef, you can add in an extra tablespoon of butter. The cooking of the mushrooms will be very important. I'm cooking on a medium-high heat still and basically frying the mushrooms in the beef fat and the butter. You'll see a lot of steam coming off of the mushrooms as they release their water and the water evaporates. The mushrooms will take 5 to 7 minutes and you'll know they're ready when they begin to brown. Once the mushrooms are well caramelized, I add in the onions and the garlic and cook until the onions have begun to brown as well. This will take another 5 to 7 minutes. After the mushrooms, garlic, and onions have been sufficiently browned, I add in 1½ tablespoons of all-purpose flour. This will serve as our thickening agent. I cook the flour mixture for a minute before adding in 1 cup of unsalted beef stock. I like to use unsalted stock and unsalted butter for my recipes as it allows me to better control the amount of salt in the dish. You can always add more, but you can't take away. When the mixture begins to thicken, I turn the heat down to medium-low and add in 1 cup of heavy cream, mixing to combine. Then I add 1 tablespoon of beef bouillon, 1 teaspoon of good Dijon mustard, and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. It's important to turn down the heat to prevent the heavy cream from boiling, as this could cause the sauce to curdle. Next, I'm going to add in the sour cream, and to prevent this from curdling in the sauce, I'm tempering by adding the hot liquid into the cold sour cream. This brings the sour cream to a hotter temperature before adding it to the mixture on the stove. I'm tempering the sour cream with just a few ladles of the sauce. Once the sour cream has been tempered, I add it back into the pot and mix to combine. Then I add back in the cooked beef, including any residual fat. The fat has a ton of flavor, so I don't want to miss out on any of it. I'm adding 2 teaspoons of mushroom broth powder to add additional depth to the flavor. Mushroom broth powder is packed with umami. You can find it at any of your local Asian grocery stores or order it online. A large container of it runs about $7 and lasts me 6 months. Next, I add in a pinch of red pepper flakes, half a teaspoon of salt, and lots of ground black pepper. At this point, it's very important to taste and adjust seasoning as needed. For me, this is absolutely perfect. I turn off the heat completely and mix in 1/4 cup of green onion. I'm only using the greens of the onion. I also chop a little extra to garnish when plating. Alright, now for the fun part, the puff pastry. I'm using store-bought puff pastry. You can make your own if you prefer, but for me, I don't have the time or the energy, and honestly, my puff pastry wouldn't turn out as good as store-bought anyways. They have it down to a science. I let the frozen puff pastry sit out for about 30 minutes as outlined on the instructions, and then go over it slightly with the rolling pin to smooth out any of the cracks from the folding. I've poured the beef mixture into a round 1½ quart baking dish, then I lay the puff pastry on top of the dish and use a rolling pin to crimp the edges. I then run a sharp knife around the edges of the dish to cut off any loose puff pastry. Don't throw away that extra puff pastry. Cut it up into small chunks, toss it in cinnamon sugar, and bake it to make a delicious dessert. I punch 3 holes into the top of the puff pastry to allow steam to come out while baking. It is very important that you set this baking dish on a baking sheet, as some of the fat may come out of the mixture and the puff pastry when baking. I bake the pot pie in a 400-degree oven for 30 minutes until it's golden brown and crispy, then sprinkle a little kosher salt over the top. This beef stroganoff pot pie is a delicious and fun fusion on a traditional pot pie and beef stroganoff. As always, I'll leave the full recipe in the description. Let me know if you make it. Enjoy!